So it's been about 2 weeks since the Foreverwinter came out in early access. Also, coincidentally, it's been 2 weeks since the Foreverwinter devs have put out QA responses to questions that they've received on their Discord server. And as always, I'm here to recap those answers for you. I'm Johnny Lockjaw, and let's talk about it. As usual, let's start with some gameplay questions. So the first question that they responded to is a repeat from previous answers. Somebody asked if they're planning on adding new in-depth mechanics such as hiding in shadows or generally throwing things to distract enemies. Obviously, they reiterated what they've said in the past. They are working on this mechanic and realized that one of the only ways to do this currently is to basically shoot a gun to attract enemies to a specific location, which they are working on. It's going to be a theme with this week's questions, but this one was also already answered. Somebody asked how it is that they're going to try to temper expectations and resist community backlash and mobbing on specific buffs or nerfs. Instead of just boilerplate answering that they already aren't going to worry about that, they basically went into a more interesting answer instead, saying that they were less interested in just blanket nerfs or buffs to the player characters themselves and were more interested in making the enemies harder by comparison. For example, missile enemies seem pretty prevalent, but that's by design. It's on purpose. It's how to make the enemies more difficult to deal with. They did also want to make it clear that they didn't want to just touch HP values for enemies or players or damage values for anything because that's lame. They did want to make sure that we knew also that they are staying true to whatever fantasy they're putting out. They do recognize that we, the player base, notices that the game is difficult and that it's rewarding to get big guns and a lot of ammo and then basically wiping maps, and they aren't going to make that not a thing. They may just eventually touch enemy values or spawns or etc. to see, what it is that they can do to not just make our player fantasy bad, basically. At the end of the day, it is a game and it's supposed to be fun, and right now the game is very fun. So I think their head is on straight with this one. Moving on, again, this question was already asked. Somebody asked what the plan with character progression was going to be. They also wanted to know specifically what it is that the pathing was going to be for different quest lines or different play styles that they had in mind. And like they said in the past, the character progression is work in progress, kind of placeholder right now. It will improve over time. But they did mention that they're going to be adding different quests and stuff to make it more interesting, so that's also good. They didn't really go into much detail on that, though. I imagine they can't. I'm fine with where the character progression's at right now. I realize that it's all placeholder, but there isn't even the full character list available, so people need to kind of tone it back a little bit on what it is that they kind of expect them to put out right now. As it stands, all of the characters, as far as I can tell, play in a unique, special way, which is cool already. It's not something that they needed to have happen at launch, and it's really interesting to see. On top of that, they're all cool, they all look badass, and the game is fun. So again, I think people need to kind of tail back what it is that they kind of expect for, roadmap progression wise at the very least. I realize it's an early access game and they need to start putting out more content. I think where the characters are at now, they're in a good enough state for this to not need to be a priority for them. Anyway, that was basically it for gameplay stuff. Let's move into some lore questions. A fun little thing, somebody asked if we can get like an in-game mini map that's a piece of paper or like a little baby sheet that we could have in game and actually look at. This got a big laugh out of Miles, and I take that as them having not thought of that before, but it's definitely on the table now, so that's kind of cool. On that, they added that there might be a rig scanner or attachment that they could add to sort of simulate that, so we'll see what's going on with that. It's definitely not something that's super needed. Obviously, the maps really aren't that confusing to sort of understand at the base template where they're at right now, on top of the fact that there's already an in-game compass that tells you where all the extracts that you have available are at, so it's not like the map is super necessary. Cool though. After that, somebody asked what the intention behind the hunter-killer system was. This has been some players' pretty big criticism, so I kind of understand where this question is coming from. In response, they're realistically designed to respond to intense aggressive acts or looting, essentially. The person who asked the question specifically stated that it feels like it's super hard to loot because you don't know what's going to make the hunter-killer spawn in. It feels like the antithesis to the whole point of the game, so I understand. They did reiterate also that the hunter-killers aren't going to go away ever, so it's kind of baked into the game. But I mean, realistically, with the latest patch that they put out, the hunter killers haven't actually been as aggressive, at least in terms of spawning in, as they were when the game released 2 weeks ago. So we're already in a better spot, and that's going to continue to adjust as players respond to it and provide more feedback. Again, early access, growing pains, etc. We've been over this before. I don't mind the hunter killers where they're at right now. I think that they're fine. It is kind of annoying sometimes. It seems super unclear what causes them to spawn on end, which is obviously the point of the question. So hopefully, with enough time, we can figure it out and diagnose it specifically. But we're not at that state yet, obviously. And the game just came out, and it's always going to be different. So who knows what's going on with that. That was actually it for lore stuff. So let's move into some technical questions. Not to beat a dead horse, but this was already asked. Somebody asked if they're going to be introducing a switch shoulder option for the camera. The answer is obviously yes, they're working on it, and they're still testing it and figuring it out. So we'll see when it comes out. They didn't say when. We don't know. After that, somebody asked what the current plans are for the AI behavior. If you'd believe it, they too want to improve the AI as well as the players. One of the things that was said and made clear is that one of the challenges right now that they're facing in terms of improving AI specifically is performance stuff. I don't know if you could tell, but one of the issues that this game kind of has right now are performance based. As it stands, it's kind of one of the players' main criticisms of the game, which is fair. The performance is kind of shoddy. The devs have acknowledged that themselves. So they wanted to make it clear that they could improve the AI today, basically, as far as I could tell from their response, but they can't, or at least won't right now, because they want the most players to be able to actually play and experience the game the best possible way that they can. So right now, the sort of band-aid blanket fix that they have is to just not overpopulate or overcompensate the AI stuff right now, which I think is fair. You don't really need better AI that's currently out there right now. To be clear, especially if it's going to tank performance on an already not performing well game, I think that the AI is fine. At the very least, it works and it's functional for what it is that it's trying to do. On top of that, I don't know necessarily what it is that they'd add. I mean, the example that the question gave is sometimes that the infantry will shoot at mechs, even though obviously they're not going to be able to take the mechs down with small arms fire. That's kind of goofy to see. Coming from a 40k fan at this point, I've seen guardsmen shoot at mechs or space marines, and basically it does nothing, but they still do it. It's not like they wouldn't do it if they knew that they were going to die anyway, Regardless, though, they are going to be looking at player feedback, and they aren't just going to touch HP totals to sort of balance things out to make them different. So that's good at the very least. After the technical stuff, most of our questions came in planned content, so buckle up. Somebody asked if there was any sort of roadmap that they could expect to come soon. If you'd believe it, they didn't necessarily point to a roadmap that they had specifically, so don't expect that. They did make it clear that maps are the top priority that they want to, build upon. With that specifically, they are trying to add the maps that we see in-game that we can't actually access, on top of just adding more maps in general. They're also planning specifically on adding more gun customization and generally more gun options. They also need to get out the additional mini-bosses that they've been working on top of new glory kill animations. They actually released 2 teasers on the Discord. I would join to see them. Also good news, hopefully some cool lore stuff in November. We'll see what's going on with that. To sort of add on that, somebody asked specifically if the maps that are already in the game were going to be expanded upon and made larger or just different to add different buildings and stuff in them so that they were more dynamic. If you'd believe it, the answer is eventually. But like they said, they were already planning on just adding more maps to just sort of build the base first before they started building up. So that's kind of where that whole thing is. They are planning on increasing the actual caps of the maps, which is good. Also a big thing, they're planning on more continent stuff that we can actually access. So there's going to be more areas that we're going to have access to at some point, which is huge news. And then obviously there's going to be more variety once more maps are added. So just kind of stick with it for now with what it is that we have. And then once the new maps are added, what people are probably looking for will be there. Obviously it's huge news that continents are going to be a thing that we have to explore. So that's going to be super exciting once that comes out. But there was no timetable for that, obviously. We'll see what's going on there. To expand a little bit on the weapons that are upcoming, somebody asked specifically if any more DMR weapons are going to be coming out. And good news, they are going to be adding more customization as the game progresses, and a new European DMR is going to be added soon. So hopefully that's going to be good. Who knows? Somebody asked specifically what the end game, quote unquote, is going to end up being. Currently, as it stands, basically the end game right now is to just continuously do the same thing over and over again, which really isn't a bad thing, but I would imagine at some point that'll become tedious or boring, and then those people will leave and wait for new stuff to come out. So anyway, that's the gist of the whole thing. And the answer is yes. Obviously, there was new planned endgame stuff. Right now, that isn't really specific, but that is something to look forward to. Miles said something specifically about a larger combat ecosystem. We'll see what that ends up being, but for now, yes, they are planning a different endgame than what it is currently. Again, early access, growing pains. Hopefully you get the point, you know? Then somebody asked if there's going to be big credit sinks that we could put our money into, like big equipment chunks that we end up losing if we actually, like, you know, die in the mission. And then obviously, if you'd believe it, yes, that is something that's planned. And also currently there are already ongoing things that they're doing to sort of keep up with what the player economy is already. For instance, they're looking at different things that the players themselves are spending their resources on and different things that they're actually doing to progress. So we'll see how the economy changes over time with whatever data that they're pulling from. It's funny, I said that there's some reoccurring questions, but this one specifically is reoccurring from the past, but also the past like a couple of questions ago. With that being said, the next question is whether or not they're going to be added more non-combat focused ways to stealth specifically, with the example being something like smokes or just different stuff that you can actually use to get around enemies. And again, like they've said, yes, with more complex stuff, they will have to take time, but they are working towards adding them, so don't fret. It's just not out yet. Actually, a big deal. Somebody asked whether they were going to be touching the enemy spawn conditions, and yes, enemies shouldn't be spawning on top of you or so close to you that it feels like they're impeding your progress on purpose. It's not intended that way. They will be touching it, and it will be improved as soon as they can get to it. After that, somebody asked whether there's going to be an add or sell all feature and whether there would be a loot all feature. Funny thing, I think that person might be a dingus because there is already a loot all feature. But they will be adding the add or sell all feature at some point. They're working on it. We'll see when that happens. They didn't say specifically when it'd be available. It's actually funny. Somebody on the YouTube comments specifically said that they thought that the devs misunderstood the question. And instead what the question was supposed to be was if there was going to be a loot all key function. But that isn't what the question said. Or at least should I say that isn't what the question was read to them. So I don't know what they expected or wanted. That seems kind of weird. Regardless, there is a loot all feature already. You just don't know what the loot is. You just have to hit the button. Not to go on a rabbit hole about that, but the quickest way to figure out what all that stuff is to then, after you loot all, dump it all on the floor and then pick it all back up really quickly. It's the funniest way to get around that. Anyway, after that, somebody asked if they could add a free look button. Obviously, this is talking about when you're sprinting. You can't actually look unless you stop sprinting and then turn and then start sprinting again. And that can be kind of cumbersome and then also, you know, prevent you from being able to escape from the enemies that you're running from. I think that that's kind of intentional. I don't know if they really want you to be able to free look, or at the very least, when you start sprinting, it feels like you're supposed to be pretty cognizant of where it is that you're going. Regardless, they did say that they're going to look into it. Obviously, adding new features to an already growing list of things that they need to start working on can either be done slowly or, you know, prioritized specifically to be done in different ways. But if they add that to the already ongoing queue of things that they need to put coders into, it'll put other work behind that if they put it forward. So we'll see what's going on with that. Specifically, they did say that they will probably look into a way for you to look behind you at the very least, so that'll be good. So hopefully that'll come out soon. And kind of the biggest news here, somebody asked when Gunhead will be available. And the quote here is very soon, apparently before the end of the year. That's considerably sooner than I was anticipating. It's also apparently considerably sooner than they were anticipating. So kudos to everyone on that for getting that prepared. That's super cool. I can't wait to see that. Obviously, once they get all of the playable characters out, at least for early access for the time being, they can start actually putting work into the player progression that people want. So, you know, we'll see what's going on. That'll be cool. I can't wait. And then, as per usual, when water questions are asked, this gets its own special area. Somebody asks what the ETA on the actual water system changes is going to be. This is apparently more of a teaser answer, but we can probably expect more information in the next week on this, actually, which is super cool. Obviously, if you'd believe it, the devs have heard all of the criticisms levied at the water system. Regardless, it's good to hear that they're actually putting forth effort into actually fixing it, and sooner than I was actually anticipating, so that's really good. Apparently, we can expect it to be robot and villain related, and there'll be more player autonomy, which is going to make it better. Again, I've said the main criticism behind the water system has always been that it lacks player agency. So here we are. There we go. This is a good change. It will probably be a good change. I would assume probably before anybody who's played for longer than 10 hours has experienced water death ever. I'm pretty sure if you had played for 4 hours, you would have never experienced water death by the time they fixed it. It's that easy to gain water. It's been such a non-issue for the last couple of weeks, but they're changing it. So congrats, everybody. We did it. Bullying works. Anyway, after the water question, we're going on to the miscellaneous stuff. Somebody asked, and this is a really good show of faith, how are you guys holding up? You being the dev team. And they thanked us for the question, or at least they thanked the person. So everybody be happy that we all got thanked by the devs, because one happy person wants to know that they're doing well. So yeah, apparently Jeff is sick, but hanging in there. Apparently that happens every time he releases a game, so probably stress on that matter. I've been stress sick before. You know, hopefully he gets better. Now, they're all working hard, obviously, and with the release of the early access, they've all been super stressed and working a lot of overtime, I would imagine. Video game developer crunch is real, and they aren't immune from it, even for an indie dev team. And probably something to be said that they put out 3 patches in the first week of the launch, so be happy that they're working as hard as they are. Hopefully with enough time they can take a rest, a well-deserved rest. After that, somebody asked if the early access launch met their expectations. I don't necessarily believe them on this. They said they didn't have any expectations specifically. That's not how it works. They definitely had numbers they were targeting. Regardless, apparently the numbers have been, quote, insane, so that's actually really good to hear. They do seem genuinely happy of how things are going, which makes me happy as not only a consumer, but I suppose a content creator at this point. I'm a member of a community of the actual game for this. It's super cool to see it grow and actually everything develop it positively for this. I'm hoping for a lot, obviously, but I know that this team is worth putting that faith into at this point. You know, we're all hoping for the best here. Obviously, they do still recognize that they need more hot fixes and patches, etc., to make the game actually work better. And obviously, they need to do more optimization stuff. The game's not perfect. Again, it's early access, and I'm not trying to make early access an excuse for them, but it's an early access game, and I think that this dev team specifically deserves at least a little leeway on the whole early access thing, because again, they're actually working hard, and they're giving us information, and they're talking to us, and they actually seem really cool, obviously, about how it is that they're going through this whole process with us. And as everyone grows, everybody will get better, and I'm very happy to be here. Anyway, after that, somebody asked if anything from the community has gotten them excited or laughed at, etc. They mentioned specifically the thirst for the harvest mothers. I wouldn't believe if you've known that. They said specifically that the memes are really great. They also said that the people making videos are much appreciated. So, specifically from me to Fun Dog Studios, you're welcome. After that, Miles shouted out a Kickstarter for a game that his friend's working on, so if you want to check that out, go watch the video. I'll link it in the description. Also, apparently Jeff jumps into random games from time to time just to see what's going on, so if you've had a random in your game a time or two, it might have been him. Who knows? Anyway, with all that being said, I think that this was actually a really good UA. There was a lot of really interesting information to come out. And obviously, I don't go super in depth on what it is that they said because, you know, I'm not them. I'm just sort of giving you the blanket information. So I will, again, link the video in the description for you to watch yourself because it is actually interesting and worth your time. I'm excited to hear what's going on with the water changes. I will make another video when that information is out on that. I already have another water video. Check that out. But I think that wraps it up for this week's QA response recap. Thank you so much for being here if you've made it this far. If you want to support me, don't be afraid to like, comment, follow, and subscribe. I would genuinely appreciate it. And as always, do me a favor, please don't die. I will see you in the next one.